Welcome, everyone. It's wonderful that you could join us this morning for this terrific panel. Before we get going, I want to thank, of course, our staff who make this all possible for us today. So thanks, Emily, and thanks to our development team for assembling this wonderful panel and arranging this for all of us this morning. I am so excited to have 5 business leaders who are friends and or alumni of the College of Business address topics this morning related to their journeys as women in business. So to get us going, I thought I'd ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, to talk a little bit about who you are, your relationship with CSU, and a little bit of a background on your company and role. So I will start, we'll go in alphabetical order with Zubaida. Bye.
Oh, usually the alphabetical order is the other way around. I ask all the time. Hi, everyone. This is Zubaida. I'm the founder and CEO of a global health women's organization called EYES. And recently I moved on to the board of EYES with a new management. And I've taken on a role with an international NGO called CARE as a managing director for CARE Social Ventures. So in my capacity, I operate all of CARE's for-profit spinouts globally, which is a very interesting position. So not many people know that international NGOs do spin out for profits that need to be managed. My association with CSU, I'm a big fan of Dean Beth, of course, and we've connected many times, but I'm also a GSSC alumni, so the Global Social and Sustainable Enterprise Program from 2010. And it's also called the Impact MBA now for people who don't recognize that name. Thank you, Beth, for having me, and I'll let others introduce yourself.
Thank you, Zubaida. And I should mention EYES, that was a company that you started and now have shifted, which is very exciting for you. So I wanted to mention that because we'll circle back to your entrepreneurial journey here in a little bit. Lisa.
Good morning, Beth, and thank you so much for having me here. It is my honor and pleasure to join everybody today. I'm Lisa Hackard. I'm a first-generation graduate from CSU back in 1997 with a dual emphasis in both accounting and finance. And after CSU, I entered the accounting profession, and today I'm an audit partner with KPMG. They're one of the big 4 public accounting and consultancy firms, and in my role, I serve some of our largest public companies. I also have a seat within our national office, where I'm the partner in charge of a team that oversees our firm's system of quality management. And I also lead our National Disabilities Network, which is my particular passion, really truly around non-apparent disabilities, including mental health and wellness. I also sit on Dean Walker's Global Leadership Council, and I'm hopeful that this fall, my family and I will be on campus again to be able to watch the Rams play football.
You know, Lisa, I hope so too. And we did put our deposit down for a football suite. So we're thinking this. So fingers crossed on that. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Pam Jeffords.
Yes, thanks so much. Glad to be here. Pam Jeffords. I live in Denver and a big supporter, of course, of Dean Walker, and I've been on the advisory council for the College of Business for a few years now and have a son at CSU Global and enjoying his time there. My company is Sapient Insights. So as Dean Walker will be talking about, just a new startup in the consulting world. Like Lisa, I spent some time with some of the big consulting firms. So I was at PwC and Mercer and spend my days talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And Pam, we'll get to this later in this morning, but DEI, is so important, such an important area right now, but always. So looking forward to hearing more from you on that in a little bit. Cynthia Patterson.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate you inviting me, Beth. I'm Dr. Cynthia Patterson, and this is my cat, Oliver, who's here to help foster some discussion as well, I imagine. And I am the regional strategic veterinarian for the Southeastern United States for the pharmaceutical company Zoetis. And Zoetis' specialty is making pharmaceuticals and diagnostic equipment exclusively for the animal industry. So that includes all animals, whether it's a cow or cat like Oliver. That's what we do. And in my role, I connect specialists throughout the Southeastern United States and their views and thoughts to people at headquarters so we can continue to develop necessary and essential medications for pets. In my specialty, I'm only really dealing with cats and dogs, so I don't see many cows or horses in my day-to-day. My ties to CSU is I am a very proud graduate of the MBA program in 2006, and I finished my veterinary degree there as well in 2008. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing some insights with everyone this morning.
Thank you so much, and forgive me, Dr. Patterson, but I love that you're a joint MBA DVM, and because you can speak to how that business part of your degree really has helped you in your career today. But as a veterinarian, you totally legitimately have a cat on your lap, and we wouldn't expect anything otherwise. But now we all feel welcome to bring our pets into the conversation this morning. So everyone in the audience, bring your animals. It's just fine. Well, thank you so much. You all are leaders in our community, leaders in business nationally and internationally, and it's my honor really to spend some time with you this morning. So let's kick it off, and I'll start with a question that we all can answer. 2020 has been an interesting year to say the least, and of course that it has extended now into 2021. What I'm interested in learning from all of you is, what did you learn in 2020 and through the pandemic that has made you a better leader? So what are some positives we might think? What did you learn in the context of this past year that you're going to take away and it's really helping better prepare you and your organizations for the future? So anyone can start.
I'm happy to start, Beth. I think I learned that I actually don't listen well. And so I learned how to listen better, just really, not interrupting, not even giving verbal cues to people as I'm in person. You tend to be like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. And then, but now you learn silence as an effective tool. But I also learned, I knew this about myself, is that I don't sit in problems very well. I consider myself a problem solver. And sometimes that's not the best thing to go into a conversation. Many of the conversations we had last year, sometimes you just kind of have to sit in it. And so I learned how to sit in a problem without saying, okay, well, we spent 10 minutes talking about it. Can we now solve it? Some problems take longer than 10 minutes to sit in. And so I learned patience around sitting in a problem, especially for mental health purposes, that it isn't always about, okay, enough talking, let's go to action. So I'm now avoiding the term, the talking is over, the action is now, which was a very common term we used to say, let's go. It's like, no, actually, we need to kind of talk we still need to talk, right? So I think listening and sitting in a problem is something that I learned that will be invaluable.
That is really interesting. What a great insight. And I haven't heard someone share that before as a result of this. So thank you. That's really interesting.
I'll build on that a little bit. I think two things that I learned this year. Number one, working remotely actually works. I did not believe that was the case pre-pandemic, and I was the first to hop on a plane and fly all over the country for different meetings, but it does work. I think we've got a lot to figure out for the long term, but what I really see is so much potential for new ways of drawing the right people together for a team without all the barriers that we had with the challenges of location. I also think when we do return to in-person interactions, I'm hopeful that we'll be so much more intentional about the relationship building and being fully present while we're there. The second thing, building on your comment about mental health, Pam, I have learned that we're all a lot more resilient than we thought. I love the prominence on mental health and how that just seems to increase daily. I love seeing people learning how to tend to their own well-being and encouraging others to do the same. And what I really think will happen is that the essential leadership skills are going to shift a lot more to include empathy, patience, listening, Pam, building on that too, and more adaptive coaching styles to really see through the Zoom when someone's having a hard time and to be able to reach that part of them to help them get through the challenge and return back to full engagement.
Wow, those are, I want to follow up on some of those questions or your comments, Lisa, as we go through, but it is interesting to think about the workforce going forward now that we learned that we can do things remote. And and how do we take what we learned there and what does it look like next year, but like 5 years from now, as we maybe blend them, but we do everything much more intentionally. Thank you for your thoughts.
I can add a little bit to Lisa and Pam. I think both of them represented how important feminist leadership became through the pandemic. And for me, it was kind of finding the balance between kind of the unpaid labor of work that I've always been fascinated with, which I think accounts for about $18 billion every single year in the global economy, and how women were doubling up to do what they were doing and burning out and falling out of the workforce much faster. However, the leadership was performing better and better. So there's a huge gap developing between kind of the leadership of women who are doing amazingly well, but the 48% workforce that's entering and dropping off. So as women leaders, I think for me, it's become very important. One, I think the big thing I saw was organizations run by women leaders did not let people go away. They were not laid off. 90% of the organizations, right? So for me, it became really important to take it upon myself to encourage women leadership and feminist leadership principles, because that's the way of the future, whether it's pandemic or not pandemic. And I think what Lisa and Pam are saying are exactly those features coming out, and more male leaders are trying to adopt that and kind of being in that ecosystem. So I think that's a huge change that I've noticed both within my own organization, the new organization that I'm with, and also globally, women leaders taking a step up.
Zubaida, do you think with the remote shift that we will see fewer women needing or dropping out of the workforce, or globally we don't know that yet?
I think the answer is no, very clearly, because the unpaid burden of work is actually going more and more. In fact, we did see a recent divorce petition in China where a divorcee woman was asked to be paid for her unpaid work for the 5 years for caring for the child by the Chinese court. And I think those are things that will start coming up, because we as women leaders need to step up and acknowledge that if we are working 8 to 10 hours of productive professional work, we're also doing additional 8 hours of unpaid work. And I think the gap is increasing, but there's a lot of momentum happening in terms of recognizing that, especially because that's been one of the major causes for women dropping out in this pandemic.
Thank you. Cynthia.
Yeah, I would love to build on that. It's always fascinating when everyone's themes align, even though we hadn't discussed any of this ahead of time. For me, you know, it's acknowledging that our worlds are very blurred right now. For me, I used to travel 90% of the time to the southeastern United States for work, and that all ended in March of last year. And I had to lead my team in a way of still being relevant to our customers, still being relevant to our business, doing business in a completely new way. I mean, everything was face-to-face for us before. And so now I'm excited that we might be able to carry things forward into the future that look really similar to what we're doing now. It allows us to take people from all over the world and get them together for meetings like this, where before everyone was a little hesitant. And so I really enjoy that. And the other thing that I think has really helped, you know, talking about resiliency, talking about mental health, is just being able to say every once in a while, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to say, gosh, this blurring is too much. And I don't know if at 9 a.m. I'm working or if I'm eating breakfast or, you know, what's going on anymore. And so just to sometimes say, hey, stop, or hey, I need help, where before it felt, you know, that was too much vulnerability. I think now many of us can really own that and say, yeah, it's okay to not be okay today. And what can I do? Who can I lean on for help to make it okay today?
Yeah, that's yeah, I find it interesting that really all of us touch in some way on the mental health piece. You know, perhaps in some ways we're more transparent to each other in our days, that are in our Zoom meetings. We're right in front of each other, and we can, I see your cat, I see your office, we're in each other's lives more, but there's the blurring, and there's good to that, and there's also challenges to that, as Zubaida mentioned. Those are really wonderful insights. I will turn to our entrepreneurs on the panel. Pam, you've been involved in a startup currently. Also, I know for sure you've been involved in supporting women-owned startups in particular, And Zubaida, of course, we mentioned briefly eyes, but you've been involved in you're an entrepreneur as well. And I wonder if you could speak to what you've learned from that experience, what has been, what has helped you be successful? What are the barriers as entrepreneurs you have experienced as women?
Yeah, happy to. And so I started my first company with my sister when we were 30. We're Irish twins, so we were 30 at the same time for 13 days. And then we actually came back together again in our 50s. To start this company. And to your point, Beth, I've been very involved in startups, especially women-owned, women of color startups in the Southeast who have lack of access to funding than some of the, Boulders of the world or the Colorados and some of the Silicon Valleys. And so for me personally, I've learned what am I good at and the focus, and also how to not do things for free. So I do a lot of unpaid labor as well. But how do you make sure that what you are good at, what you are known for, that you are not afraid to ask to be paid for that? And so that's something that I think, again, women tend to do is we say, well, let me just get in the door by doing something for free. And I found that people don't value anything for free, period. So they'll value you more if you ask for what you're worth and know what you're worth all the time. So that's been this focus of this last company, but I wouldn't say I always understood that. I always felt like there was some aspect of business development that said, well, I've got to sell them first and sell them on me. And it's like, no other profession do you do that. I would imagine, Lisa, you wouldn't say, well, let me do your taxes for free or your auditing for free for a year. And then, we don't ask people to do things for free when we value it and respect it. So that's one of the things we've definitely pivoted this startup. And I would say to anyone, even in a large company, you have that entrepreneurial spirit. You're either starting up a new department or you're taking on a new division. Whatever it is, think about it just like a startup and ask for what you're worth, know what you're worth, and focus. And then delegate or let others do the work that isn't core to what the strength that you're going to bring. So I like to think I've been an entrepreneur my whole career, even when I was with large companies as well, and brought that spirit.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you so much. Zubaida.
Sure. So for me as an entrepreneur, I think the big insight I gained was there's very few women CEOs or entrepreneurs out there trying to raise money. I think globally it's only 9% of CEOs that are women and maybe 23% in the C-suite leadership. And so it's hard to find counterparts whom you can trust and who you can lean on for support. And the mental health piece we're coming back to again, it's very lonely. It's very depressing to be going through those rounds. And I always like to say stories to understand. For me, the most depressing part of my fundraising journey was in my second year when I was trying to raise $3 million of Series A. I had finished my seed round. I was at this pitch where we were like 10 or 12 people. And two of us were women. So I was pitching maternal and newborn health, and she was pitching menopause. And we pitched, no questions, everybody clapped, they were patting on our back. But this one person there that night raised $1 million, and he was pitching hyperhidrosis. I'm not sure how many people know what hyperhidrosis is, but it's a condition that most men have, some women have, it's sweaty hands. So he pitched this solution to say, hey, when men go out on dates, it's very embarrassing for them to have sweaty hands. And that's the company that raised $1 million, right? And me and the other lady who was pitching a similar situation, hot flashes for women, which 50% of women go through in their life globally, right? And so for me, the eye opener was that night. I was like, there is something wrong. It's not about me. It's not about her. It's about what people look at as solutions. Mm-hmm. And I was counting the number of women who invested in him. And that was the day I realized that patriarchy wasn't just with men, it was also with women, mm-hmm. right? And so that, I think for me, that's the biggest challenge that I faced as an entrepreneur, is that fighting that patriarchy, bringing the women's health, bringing gender-based issues to the table for investment. I've pushed really hard for 13 years after, but I think that was a big challenge, and I don't know how we would solve it. But intentionally, what I have done is I've taken down patriarchal comments from men and women, and I would analyze it every week and score it out saying, well, this is not relevant to me, or this is not relevant to me. So take out those negative comments, and did it myself because I didn't find any ally at that point. So I think for me, the biggest lesson I would tell women entrepreneurs is that it exists. Just don't let that affect you negatively. And today, more than a decade ago, there is support for women to lean on each other, and there are groups to support you. Like, find yourself those cohorts and be more positive as you go out and raise money.
And Zubaida, how have you been able to that's a huge barrier. And by the way, Pam Jeffords' company is designed to address that very thing, those very challenges you just described. How did you, Zubaida, become more successful? Because the patriarchy is still there.
Still there. I think for me, I found myself a personal board of advisors. So I had 4 core women who were there to support me, not my business, not the work that I was doing, not my passion, but to support me so I can stay grounded and do what I intend to do. And I think that was a game changer for me. And that was a few years into me building my business. And I think that lean-in group that I created for myself was what carried me over through the years.
That's very good. But there's also a lot of literature, that backs up your experience in terms of women raising money, and just, there's a prototype out there and it doesn't look like you or Pam or me, and it's interesting how powerful that really is. So congratulations to you. Thank you both. Lisa, I want to shift and talk specifically about your experience in accounting. When our college was founded in the late 60s, accounting was a largely male-dominated profession. We now know that over half of our accounting graduates are female, and our accounting department has a female woman chair, Dr. Lisa Kutcher. Mm-hmm. What has helped pave the way for women to become a larger force in accounting and other business-related fields?
Thank you for this question, Beth. I could talk about this for a long time. So if I go too long, tell me to put the brakes on. I think there's a lot of contributing factors here. Some of those that are top of mind for me is, number one, all of the women and the inclusive men who paved the way in future generations. I think that there's no possible way for us to measure in all the ways that perceptions get shifted when people work with and see women in leadership roles, along with men who have those inclusive leadership styles. And I think that those two things have been and will continue to be very, very key. Another contributing factor is sharing stories. We've been doing a lot of this at KPMG, short videos, blog posts, panels, featuring our women, our inclusive men, and all of our underrepresented groups, just little bits on who I am, how I got here, the challenges I faced along the way. I think that for a lot of our women, there's this perception of perfection at the top, right? Like, I look at this incredibly illustrious panel and I've got this vision in my mind of how perfect the 4 of you are, right? But I know the reality of it is that that's not true, right? And then the misperception is that those coming up along the way think, I can never be like that because I'm not perfect, right? And so through sharing stories, I think we help everybody understand that none of us are, right? We make mistakes, we learn, we try again, we make more mistakes, we try again, we try better, and it's a journey. I think that the more we can talk about how you don't have to be perfect to be successful, and in fact, taking some hits and some wrong turns along the way and learning how to recover, that's pretty darn important skills to master. I think the last thing that I'll mention on this topic is around metrics. As an accountant and finance grad, I love data and charts and all the different things that we can sort, but the focus has gotten more prominent for many organizations around metrics, setting goals for maintaining our women and our underrepresented talent. I mean, you said it, Beth, 50% of our accounting grads are female, right? So when you look at the top of the partnership, the highest ranks of the leadership of our firm, well, it's not 50%. And why is that? Right? So we've been doing a lot of work and really thinking about, where are we hiring from? Mm-hmm. What are we hiring for? Right? How do we foster an environment to not just get here, but to succeed here? And not just to succeed here, but how do we lead here? Right? And it's a very uncomfortable thing to do, but I encourage everybody who's in a leadership position to really think about those things and acknowledge the hard truths about biases or practices or behaviors that are not in line with your goals for bringing women and underrepresented groups up to the top, because having that diversity of thought is only making organizations better. And when organizations get that right, we see it in some very, very powerful ways. So I think having the courage to figure out where are we falling short and making it better is something that I would encourage all leaders, especially those that are coming up through the ranks at CSU, to really focus on, right? And then when a panel like this exists 10, 15 years down the road, we can have a conversation again about how that changed.
Yeah, thank you. Your sharing stories is interesting because I've been thinking about this culture, because a lot of this is cultural change, and but it's so intangible and invisible and implicit, and but sharing stories make it tangible. So if you can intentionally create and build upon and share certain kinds of stories, you begin to shift, right? Just subtly, but these are subtle biases are implicit. They're, it's a more subtle way, but maybe the way, one powerful way to change that. And I know, this is just a quick story. Our business school was founded in 1966, and some of our earliest graduates were actually accounting. And I have one of our alums from 1966 was accounting, and she told me a story of at that time they wouldn't allow women to go into auditing because they didn't want them to travel and be a temptation to men on the road. And I thought, that's just 50 years ago. Like, that's not that, we're a young business school for that to be in our history. It was just so eye-opening to me. So all those people, she paved part of the group that paved the way to make things better, by pushing and changing things. But it was really, very incredible, but inspiring to see you in your role now in auditing, not tax.
Not tax. Well, and that's an interesting story, Beth, right? Because I think that even though that was a number of years ago, that's still happening today. And I spent some time working in different parts of our nation, and I had always been partial to wearing dark suits and pants, just because I've never thought that I was the graceful type that could wear dresses, to be quite honest. But I encountered a female partner who was not interested in forming a women's leadership group with me. And she told me she spent her entire career focused on making sure that the men she worked with didn't notice that she was a woman, because that was how she felt she needed to fit in. And I enjoy challenges. My husband might tell you I don't know how to back down from them, but I thought about that and realized that I wanted to shift the conversation. And so I went out and I bought a bunch of dresses, and I bought some high heels, and I started wearing colors like blue and pink and doing different things, like painting my nails, right? How feminine can I be was what I was thinking. And that was probably 10 years ago. I met a young woman who saw me speak at just a regular meeting, a status update that we were having. She is now the leader of the women's group in that particular small southern town. And she said that she will never forget coming into the room and seeing this woman wearing a pink dress talking about important things. And that inspired her to start the group. So I didn't know that at the time. And I was just so proud that she had done that, right? And making a difference for all those future generations.
I love that story. I picked a pink jacket today, and I was inspired by Deborah Bateman. Her ears are ringing, but she's a CEO of a bank in Arizona Community Bank, and she did such a wonderful job creating community. And when I met her, I felt like she just stepped off out of the movie Legally Blonde. So she's and she's in a bank, which is conservative, in a pink jacket and white pants, and all, just as you described. And I love how that inspired you, because she inspired me today. And think about all the women you're inspiring right now and with your remarks. So thank you. Cynthia, you took a really unique path, and I know a hard path, of pursuing both your MBA and a DVM. What led you to that decision? Because you're a glutton for punishment, obviously. And how has your business degree assisted you in your career?
Yeah, clearly I was a little bit insane at the time. And I think back, someone asked me this recently, how'd you do that? I honestly, I don't know how I survived that period in my life, except for being surrounded by amazing people who helped keep me honest and helped keep me on track, right? Because that was a lot. Doing 2 degrees that are individually challenging, but doing them at the same time is pure insanity. And honestly, it was really brave on CSU's part, I have to admit, to even consider me for that type of program, because I didn't have any business training before I decided to tick that box and sign up for this thing that sounded really fascinating. But there weren't really a whole lot of people to look at who had done it before me. There was only one class before my class came to CSU. So there really wasn't a big model of what this was all going to look like. But hands down, the best decision I've made in my entire life, because it continues to be an everyday thing for me. You know, I did it not really knowing exactly what my career was going to shape up to be. I didn't have, at the time that I had intended to do this, a clear vision for where I wanted my veterinary career to go. All I knew is I really wanted to be a veterinarian. And I had, worked at a vet clinic for a few years, out of high school, just to have that, job to help pay for gas and Starbucks, that kind of thing. And early in that time, I never wanted to be a veterinarian. I wanted to be a human physician. But then I realized, like, veterinary medicine is such a special profession. It's such an intimate bond, almost like the bond a pediatrician has with a family, right? Sort of that same connection. And I wanted to be a part of that. But the veterinarian I worked for was a terrible businessman. He barely could pay us as staff. There were times he couldn't pay us. There were times he couldn't pay his taxes, and the clinic would close. So I said, wow, I want to be a veterinarian, but I don't want to be this veterinarian. I want to make a living. I don't want to live in my car. And so getting an MBA seemed like a fantastic way to close the gap for me, because that's sort of how I live my life. I look at where I am today and where I want to be. And then I say, what types of opportunities exist to close that gap? And then mysteriously, I found out about this amazing combined program. And I said, that's going to be the one for me. And thankfully I got in. They only took 5 people a year. So it was really a crapshoot whether it was going to happen. And hands down, every day has been one of the most essential decisions I ever made, because in my role now, I'm not practicing. I'm not doing surgery anymore. I'm not, working with people's pets every day. Now I'm actually using all of the skills that I gained during my MBA program on a daily basis, even more than my veterinary degree. My veterinary degree is just the avenue with which I use language to communicate with people now. But it's my business training that really sets the stage for me and all of the success that I have and my day-to-day job. And again, I thank CSU for being brave, because there was no reason for them to pick, this 20-year-old kid who had grown up in a poor neighborhood. I didn't know anyone that owned a business. I didn't, I was raised by a single mother. I had no idea. I never read a profit and loss statement before. I'd never heard about supply chain management. And here you all took that chance on me. So if there's anything to take away from this segment, it's sometimes, for those of you who are leaders out there, be brave and take a chance, even if you don't have the clear idea of exactly how the person in front of you is going to do all of the things they say they're going to do. Just take that chance, because they might surprise you, just like I continue to surprise myself. And I know I surprised a lot of people way back when I was that young 20-year-old just trying to figure out who I was and what life was all about.
Cynthia, thank you for being brave. I mean,
or crazy.
I'm not sure. And I think that's important to hear about women and young women. Great courage, bravery, confidence. You somehow had that inside of you, that you at 20 years old weren't questioning your ability. Maybe you were, but you took the leap, and that's so inspiring. And what's interesting, I think, for me about you now is that really you have a business mind. But I know, though, you mentioned the language that you use. That's how you communicate with your clients now. That's so important, to speak that language for them to trust you. So that blend is just terrific.
Yeah, I love it. And I still practice. Every once in a while, I'll sneak in a day where I'll help out a clinic here in Denver, and I'm reinvigorated how much I love this profession. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's all about having a business mind for me. And again, I would not be where I am today without having added that MBA to my DVM degree. It was, again, best decision I ever made, hands down.
Well, I'm sure your kitty is especially very lucky, has no idea. All right.
Walker, we do. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have a question in the chat. We had a question mainly for Zubaida and Pam. I bet you'd have some insight as well to this. Somebody was just reading that venture capital funding for women-led startups dropped from 2.8% in 2019 to 2.3% in 2020. Any insight on how women can overcome that?
I think that goes back to what I was saying, right? There's 9% women in leadership, and somehow the society and the women themselves tend to believe that they can be owners of small and growing businesses and not VC style businesses. So the number of women who pitch to VC businesses are very far few in between. If you see the entrepreneurship trend in small and growing business has definitely gone up, because 48% of women working in kind of the lower segment of the supportive side of corporate are coming out and starting small businesses. But the women who are taking their businesses to that global level, to that national level, are far and few in between. So clearly there's a dip because, one, I think women are holding leadership and holding those companies where they are, and they're doing amazingly well. But then there is a huge dropout, and there's a big segment of women in the small and growing businesses space, and that those women need to be taught to think big, think global, and scale, right? And that's kind of the gap. And I think that's what I would attribute that dip to.
Yeah, and I would say, women investing in women, I think, Zubaida, you said it earlier, that there's no data that says that women are, doing better at, in fact, investing in women or supporting women-owned companies. So when you do have women that are in positions to give, consider, where is your money going? And, kind of to Lisa's point, we still have 80% of the corporate leaders who also direct funding, right? If you think about the entire ecosystem, right, they're directing where is their foundation dollars going, where are their investment dollars going, what does their supply chain look like? Are they only looking at companies in their supply chain that have that are women owned or minority owned, or are they looking at also, and who are they employing, right? Where is that entire employment coming from? So I think getting more women and people of color in leadership adds to where the dollars are going for the startup community and who's getting the funding. But there are women impact funds now, Golden Seed, Jump Fund, just to name two, that are specifically allowing women to put our dollars into women-owned and women-led companies. So getting active, even the smallest amount of dollars, and this is not about putting it into a nonprofit, meaning expect your return, right? I know there are some out there that women give a few $1,000s and they don't receive anything back. They're just, again, they're donating their money. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying invest your money, expect something back from that money. And oh, by the way, you're helping these women-owned companies too. So I absolutely am expecting a 10x return on my dollars, and all of my dollars are invested in women-owned tech companies and healthcare companies. So it feels good, but at the same time, I'm expecting it to contribute to my retirement. So don't be afraid to expect something back from those investments.
Lisa, did you want to add?
Well, I just noticed the parallel here. So Pam's been talking about the question about value, right? And as women, how often we just do things for free, right? And I can't help but wonder if, Zubaida, if that plays into what you saw happening in these pitches, where people might have unconsciously been thinking, well, the women are just going to do this for free, so let's give our money to the guy who needs the money as an incentive. But I love the work you're doing, Pam, because I feel like the more we build up the monetary aspect of that value, the more likely the folks will be to direct the money from the pitches to the women who are pitching the right business answers, right?
Absolutely. And there's something else you said, Lisa, and I know it's getting a little bit, Beth, onto another question that you were going to ask about, why is D&I still important? And it's still important because of these stories. When you talk about when women go into pitches, most of the time they're being told here's the past calibration of success, which we're all men. So act like a man, be like a man, present like a man, and dress like a man at work. I mean, and I'm guilty of that at being 53 years old. I remember the first time somebody says, "Oh my gosh, I completely forgot you weren't one of the guys." And I was like, yes, right? I mean, that was what we were told to do, right? Is make them forget that you're a woman. And so that was sad. And we wore the horrible outfits, right? So sad was the entire outfit of it. But people who tell me today, well, Pam, can't we just wait this out? Isn't this next generation going to solve all this? And the answer is absolutely not. And so, so my daughter, as Beth knows, I've got 4 kids. One of them is a senior in civil engineering and did an internship on I-70 last summer, and was told by a woman, a well-intentioned 35 some odd year woman civil engineer, Caroline, your job is to make these men forget you're a woman. Now let's forget the fact that she's 6'1", blonde hair, blue eyes. Not sure they're going to forget, but let's think about what she's telling her to do. And do you know the advice she gave? She said, don't go use the porta potty on the bridge, because guys just pee off the side of the road. Every time you walk to the porta potty, you're reminding them that you're a woman. So drink less water. Now let's draw the line. It was 90 degrees outside. She's on a bridge in the middle of Colorado heat, trying not to drink water, not to go to the bathroom. What do you think is going to happen? Not a great day for her with a headache. She comes home and says, Mom, I don't know that this is for me, because I have to drink a lot of water, right? And I'm thinking to myself, I counsel CEOs of engineering firms, very large engineering firms, every day on D&I and how to get more women in leadership and people of color and socioeconomic diversity. Never would I have ever said your barrier is you've got a woman out there telling another woman to stop drinking water and not use the porta potty, right? It wouldn't have come. We've got to get these stories of wear your hair straight, don't use the bathroom, dress like this. Those are really the day-to-day things that are making people go, well, maybe I shouldn't go ask for money. Maybe I shouldn't go ask for a raise. Maybe I shouldn't be a civil engineer. That's the reality of these, whether they're well-intentioned or not, these continued things being passed down to these generations. Be like a man, be more white, be more this. This is how the last person got money, so you go do what they did. And if that is what ends up happening, we will, one, lose the diversity, lose the impact of the diversity that we're getting. But 2, it just doesn't work, right? I mean, again, I don't call myself a woman leader because the reality is nobody followed me. And so if we as women, as 50-plus-year-old women, don't stop telling these stories of how we did it, because whatever we did to make partner by 40, it did not work for my colleagues. So stop the storytelling about what you did to act more like a man. Start being not a trailblazer, but be a leader. Help people, guide them to be their authentic selves. And so I'm a little bit still like these stories that we all went through. This next group of women and men being told to be macho, that's the mental health issue. I mean, it's just, it's still a cycle. We have to really watch the stories that we're telling to make sure that they're story forward, as opposed to let's go story backwards, right? So sorry about that. I know I kind of took us.
Well, but kudos to your daughter for bringing that to light, because who would have guessed that that was something to solve for, right? But we need to know what the problem is before we can solve for it, because when we step back and think about who are we and how do we want to interact together, I can't imagine anyone would intentionally say, yes, we are the kind of company that wants everyone to behave like straight white men and pee off the bridge. Like, that's just not a goal. And nobody would intentionally say that. And so I think if you draw to people's attention, here's what your behaviors are saying about you. Are you sure that's who you want to be? Most folks would say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know. I'm so sorry. Let's fix it. So I think that the courage to be able to do that. And just one thing I do want to add on to that, Beth, is what I see so inspiring in this generation that's coming up out of the universities right now is such a solid grounding in personal values, right? And I see it in so many folks fresh out of university. They know who they are, they know what's okay with them, they know what's not okay with them, and they are not shy about saying, you know what, that's not for me. And I think that's exactly what we need, because if you're not grounded in who you are and what's important to you, you can get blown in the wind, and you can get caught up in those past practices that lead us to places we don't intend to go. And so I'm hopeful, and I'm inspired by stories like what you shared about your daughter to recognize that that situation did not line up with her values.
If I
Zubaida,
something, having worked in public health for now 13 years, though I have nothing to do with healthcare and medicine, I'm a self-learned, maybe gynecologist by that aspect. The biggest public health catastrophe is, how we're speaking about mental health, we speak about representing ourselves as who we are as women, but there's a biological side to us where we're trying to be like men, and that is a silent catastrophe that's not yet in front of us today. So women are skipping placebo pills of their contraceptives and going right to the next pack just because they want to be at par with men at work, not have their biological cycle every month. This is a big issue with corporate America, corporate Europe, corporate India, at least those 3 countries that I know. And in a quest to act like men and succeed like them, forget about the stories 50 years ago, we are suffering that internally and doing things to ourselves that are not good. And we aren't even speaking about those, right? In 2 to 3 decades from today, when clinical trials to show that that's a disaster for a woman's body and for her mental health, we're going to wake up and we're going to lose a lot of women leaders then, right? So it's very important for us today to change that patriarchal mindset of wanting to be like men. We need to, I think there is no male-female leadership. There is a leadership that has the yin and the yang. It has to be combined. And we need to be able to portray that and not fight for, sometimes I feel like, Pam, that, right? When we start creating funds for women, we are taking 2 to 5% of the majority of the money and saying, hey, now we're investing only in women. It's not fair to women, right? Like, I feel like that's a disaster. Yes, we're doing a start, but we need equal share at equal footing. And that's something we need to create for women leaders of the future and in the next decade, because we can keep talking about equality, but we have to work on equity, both biologically and on the physical front.
Well, and Zubaida, isn't it also about our men too, right? This traditional model doesn't always fit for all of them either. And I have to believe if it's detrimental to the women to attempt to fit this mold, it's detrimental to our men as well, right?
Right? It has to be an inclusive society. There's no point fighting for, like sometimes I wonder, why did the universe give me 3 boys? Like I'm a mother to 3 men, right? And I look at them and think they need a role model like me to go out in the world and have a perception of a woman who's so different from all other women, right? Like when my kindergartner comes and says, Mama, you're not there for mommy's coffee. I've never been to a mommy's coffee because I've never had time, right? Like, to talk to him and make him explain to his friends that my mom works, she just can't come to this coffee, right? It's such a different perspective in the world. Like I can't change the world, but I can change the world for my 3 boys who are representation of those men in the world tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what you just said was so meaningful. We can't always change the world, but we can change, what's right around us. And veterinary medicine is an interesting example of an industry that has become now, at least in the United States, on the small animal side of things, predominantly female. And almost 70% of the small animal veterinarians in the US identify as female. And so that has been an interesting transition, but tying into something that was brought up earlier about a lot of women being very comfortable giving things away for free. It's challenging when you are the leader of the business, when you as a veterinarian, you have to decide, how am I charging for things? Well, I think I can help this family out just a little bit. And a lot of young veterinarians really struggling with things like student debt, for example. It's phenomenally expensive to become a veterinarian, and starting salaries are abysmally low in terms of health professions. And so it's finding that balance, and how do we, as leaders of business, not just being female leaders, but just leaders in general in business, how do we help those people who are just starting out or who just want to start out? I was just seeing in the comments, we have a high school student here. How do we help those young women and young men, right? We do have to think about this equitably. How do we get them there? How do we be that change that needs to happen? I agree with you. It has to start with the immediate world around us and the things that we do have impact on.
I thought when you, Cynthia, because there's other professions, well, actually, Lisa, maybe accounting that were male dominated become more female, but certainly veterinary medicine. Yeah. Sometimes when we see a former female dominated profession becoming male dominated, salaries go up.
Yeah.
I don't know the other way around. I can only imagine, given your comments actually about deciding, oh, how can I help this family, or
Right. Yeah, in vet med, the salaries have stagnated compared to the phenomenal debt, right? Debt has gone up tremendous. Back in the 80s, it was maybe $5,000 to become a veterinarian, to go through an in-state program. And now it's not uncommon for me to meet fourth-year students who are saying they easily have $250,000 in debt now. So that's a phenomenal difference in a very short period of time, with just a very tiny increase in salary as the profession has become more female. I know that the legal profession is going through this right now, as well, as more female lawyers are present in the profession that was traditionally very male dominated, right? And it does have an impact on the overall salary of people in those professions. And, the topics that we've talked about today, that's exactly the things we have to bring to light as to how we fix it. How do you stand in front of an HR team and say, hey, you're not paying people well enough? Not just me, but all of the people working in the same role in the company are not being paid enough. That's something where I got brave one day. Again, the beauty of having gone through an MBA program, sometimes you take bold steps, and I'm not a veterinarian first. I was not trained as a veterinarian first. I'm a business person first. Thank goodness, again, for the program. But to be able to stand up to leaders in my company and say, hey, this isn't working. I appreciate what you're paying me. However, I'm worth way more, and so is everyone else. And it did lead to a pretty significant bump in salary for all of the veterinarians that were working in the field. So, you have to just be brave. You have to be willing to take a few risks, and women have to be willing to extend a hand and say, hey, I'm trying to elevate everyone that I can. That's
you for stepping up and asking for that. Right. I think that one thing that I'm seeing a lot of discussion around is this acronym ESG. Don't know if that resonates with anybody, but it's environment, social, and governance. These are big questions, right? Mm-hmm. KPMG is having conversations with the companies we serve, with regulators, but it's a strategy, right? Many companies are thinking about, in addition to our primary business purpose, what is going to be expected of us from all of our stakeholders around environment, social, and governance. And guess what? It costs money. Right? If you're going to execute against corporate strategies, there's a cost to that. So maybe that's an avenue to help lift up the pay and to bring the value. And Pam, where you and your firm can bring so many insights to how we do that to lift everybody up.
Yeah, that's a great, in our business school, we're about business for a better world, and ESG is part of that. And we're running out of time, and I want to make sure if we have any questions to have a moment to get to one or two, but I just had to talk about our generation today, Lisa, our students, this generation. They are our future, but if you were here at the university, you would feel like our future is in good hands. Because our students they want to live a life of purpose, of meaning. They want to work for an organization that has a purpose beyond profit. And we want to be a business school that is about purpose and having a purpose and meaning that our students can connect to and feel like I'm part of something special here. And that's what our students are looking for today. And I think, Pam, that's what your daughter is looking for. It's more than a career or a paycheck. It's how do I make this world a better place? How do I making meaningful differences, as Cynthia just did for other veterinarians to raise their pay? And what Zubaida's work is all about this. But it's very inspiring, and we just I can't say enough about this generation and our students. They're really fantastic. Emily, is there any questions or?
Yes, there's a great question. And one thing before we run out of time, I just want to mention, Amanda's gonna put a link in the chat for us. We do have an upcoming executive education course focused on women in leadership. So CSU alumni do get a 50% discount. Take a peek at that. Yes, so exciting. So take a peek at that. The one question I wanted to make sure that we got to is just about work-life balance. How can we assist our young women in business with maintaining that work-life balance?
I like to think of a work-life integration, because I hate the word balance, because it's a tough one. It makes them feel like they're contradictory. And I would say it is about, looking at it in a longer term than today or this week or this month. And I was fortunate to have 4 kids that were very healthy. So this is from a perspective of I had healthy children, and it is making decisions that are very short term, as opposed to, well, I'm not going to take this job because in 3 years I might want to blank, whatever the blank is, right? If things change in 9 months, COVID, who knew, right? So don't take a job, not take a job, or not take an assignment because you think in a certain amount of time you're going to want to do something else. It is okay to change your mind later. It is okay to take a job that you're not going to want in 3 years. It is okay to take a job that you're not going to want in a year, right? I always say it takes 9 months to grow a spine, right? In your body. But I have women that'll say, Pam, I want to have a child in 2 or 3 years, so I'm like, literally, like, think about, you're going to grow a spine in 9 months. You can change a job in 3. Right. So make your decisions, zig and zag, and then really make sure, again, that you, that I think I mentioned this in the comments, surround yourself with people that are going to push you and guide you. And yes, mentors and sponsors are great, but that person next to you saying, Pam, you should go for that job, is going to be more valuable to your success than any mentor or sponsor could be.
I'd just like to add to Pam, I think it's just, given the spirit of the panel, I feel like this is such a gendered question. I don't think any man has ever asked, how do you balance it? It's like asking, how do you love your 2 kids equally, right? Like, come on, right? I think one thing we as women have to learn is ask for help. And second, we have to stop asking women, how do you do it?
Yeah.
There is no secret sauce. There's no secret formula. Each of us have a life. We are going to live it. We have to live it. We have a family. We have parents. We have siblings. We have to manage it. It's just the way your professional life blends with your personal life. And there is this question there are 2 big questions that people have asked me all the time. Have you been to the Gates Foundation? How do you do it? And I hate both those questions, right? It's like, you shouldn't be asking women that question, because you have to believe in their ability and capability to do what they've committed to do, no matter how big it is.
I think that's perfect, right? Do what you've committed to do, and then be clear about what you need to be successful, right? Certainly it's investment of time in your professional growth, but also in your personal relationships, whether that's with a spouse, a partner, children, friendships, and with yourself, right? Taking good care of yourself. We need all these pieces to be successful in any of them. And you don't hear men talking about how they divvy up their time for all these things, but we know they take time to go to the golf course, they take time to go to the baseball game, and those are non-negotiables for them. So I always encourage our women to do what is right for you at this moment and be clear that that's your number one priority, and then be there fully, right? And then turn your attention to the next thing and get great about time management, but do what you committed to do, Zubaida. I like that.
Ask for help.
I like those. And ask for help. We all need help. All of us do, because nobody can do this by themselves, right?
I agree. I think my life lesson was really, I'm here to learn to ask for help, because it's something I was so bad at. And then COVID happened, and now I have to ask for help. And, to Pam's point, I think the term work-life balance is a kind of an awful phrase, because I know I have I would have to admit, I have very poor work-life balance. But that was one of the gifts that COVID gave me, was time to be present, time to be here, and to say, hey, I matter as much as everyone else that I care so much about, and all the causes I care so much about, and the things I do. I matter as much as those things. And if I don't start investing in myself, even just a tiny bit, I'm not going to be able to care for anyone, right? My world will crumble and forget work-life balance. That doesn't matter anymore. So for me, it was trying to find that thing that really sparks joy, and diving into it, carving out specific time, and still getting enough sleep, and still drinking enough water, and doing all those things. But yes, it's just a matter of don't forget that you matter. Each of you out there, you matter, and you have to care for yourselves too. That will help you with work-life integration, as Pam puts it.
Well, and isn't asking for help another way of extending a development opportunity to someone else?
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Lisa. This was amazing. I know everyone that's on the call with us just wishes this could go on. I'm thinking, how can we get us all together and build a course around women in business, women in leadership, because this is, wow. I mean, we dove into some topics fairly deeply, but on the other hand, we're just hitting the surface of so many important issues. I can't thank you enough for your time this morning. I don't know if we would have been able to do this so easily without Zoom. This is a great forum for this kind of thing, I must say. And thank you again to everyone who joined. And this was just tremendous. It couldn't have been better, and I couldn't have learned more. I just really appreciate your insights, your wisdom. And I know you've made an impact on everyone who was able to join us today. So thank you all.